Have a big problem with stimulus, so he just makes it bigger. He realized many thought health care reform went too far, so he pushes it to be even further. And then he reasoned even a temporary drilling ban would cost him votes in the Gulf, so he makes it all but a permanent one. Presidential historian Jane Hampton Cook does see a pattern here, that if this guy is trying to get reelected, he sure ain't acting like it. What if he's not trying to get reelected, Jane?
Well, I mean, that's certainly a possibility. I mean, he did say earlier this year that he'd rather be an awesome first-term president than a mediocre two-term president. The problem with that is that you have to be an awesome first-term president to be a second-term president, and your policies and the people's opinions and their votes need to mesh a little bit better than what we're seeing right now. So I do think that what really is motivating Obama, and what I think has all along, is his ideology. I think he cares more about his ideology than he does polls or people's opinions on things or politics and the fallout.
So you argue that eventually he believes, I'm sorry, Jen, that the public will catch up to him, right?
I think he thinks that, but I don't think that that's actually what's happening. I mean, you look at health care. A Rasmussen poll recently said that 59% of Americans wanted to repeal that. And I don't think I don't think it's working for him if that's what he's thinking. I just think he has a set ideology, and that's a higher priority for him than in anything else. And you really haven't seen that in a president in recent history at all.
Normally when a president opts out, you know, of running again, Lyndon Johnson comes to mind in 1968. He had inherited John Kennedy's presidency, then ran overwhelmingly to get elected in his own right in 1964, but opted out, I really believe at the time, only because he was darn near beaten in a primary that year. Then he read the tea leaves and took himself out. If this president were to take himself out this early, which is far from certain, that would be relatively unprecedented, would it not?
That certainly would be, and I think the closest thing we would see if that happened was James Polk. I mean, he pretty much said before he took the oath of office that he didn't want to run for a second term, and I think that's just highly unusual in American politics. And you look at what motivates presidents. I mean, what motivated Ronald Reagan and what people loved about him was that it was patriotism, renewing the American spirit, fueling the American economy because of the American spirit, going out and starting businesses. And you look at Bill Clinton, what people really thought was great about him was how smart he was politically and how he could look at the polls and make some adjustments if he needed to, you know, declare that the era of big government is over if he needed to.
But he co-opted that, and he read the tea leaves, like you say. I can't imagine, and you know this stuff far better than I ever will, Jane, but I cannot imagine this president of a similar mindset, that I think he is driven far more by cause, to his credit, whether you like it or not, than Bill Clinton ever was or ever would be. And I think he would risk a great deal, even his presidency, and making it a one-term one for that cause.
I think you're right. I mean, I think Bill Clinton was pragmatic, he was political, and I think you're seeing an ideological president in Barack Obama. And I think that that's why you'll see him step into a local issue in New York with the mosque issue, and it doesn't matter because he's presented his ideological viewpoint on that issue.
But, you know, to what I mentioned earlier, Jane, about hoping the public catches up with you as we're looking at that famous quote as to his wanting to be a really good one-term president, how much of it is Lincoln-esque in this sense, that Abraham Lincoln felt that however people were averse to fighting a war over slavery, it was well worth it in his eyes than just breaking up the nation, and that he hoped, and indeed it turned out that way, that the public ultimately followed him in that regard. Now, I'm just wondering whether there is a method to what would seem like madness in the face of defying poll after poll, sentiment after sentiment against stimulus, against some of the big initiatives like health care, that he wants to stay in longer to complete that and hopes that he can take Americans with him to see that through fruition.
Well, I mean, that could be in his thinking, and certainly he's a huge admirer of Lincoln, but the times that we live in are, of course, far different than Lincoln's time period. And we're not in a civil war, and the issues are not on as grand a scale. But I think it's interesting that what really I think Americans care about is the economy. And he shifted and focused so much on health care that I think that detracted from, you know, working to to boost jobs in the American people's minds. And so he really, I don't think Lincoln, for example, would step into too many local issues that are really out of the president's domain in terms of, and can only hurt you really when you step into that at the local level. So it's a very different presidency that we're looking at right now.
I know what you're saying, Jane. I knew Lincoln. Lincoln was a friend of mine. This guy's no Lincoln. I think that's the gist of it. Jane Hampton Cook, thank you very, very much.